What would you do if your king suddenly stabbed a nobleman to death with his own hands, wandered into the forest barefoot for days, and then came back acting like nothing happened? What if he allegedly decided that his favorite goat deserved a title of nobility? And what if things got so bad, so unbelievably chaotic, that the entire Swedish aristocracy essentially looked at their monarch and said, "You know what? Legally speaking, this man is no longer a person. This isn't fiction. This isn't some fantasy novel. This is the real, documented, absolutely unhinged story of Erik XIV of Sweden, a king who began his reign as one of the most brilliant and promising rulers in all of Europe, and ended it as a prisoner in his own kingdom, slowly poisoned by the people who once knelt before him. And the wildest part, historians still can't fully agree on where the madness ended and the political scheming began. So let's talk about it. To understand how far Erik fell, you need to understand how high he started. Born in 1533, Erik was the eldest son of Gustav Vasa, the founder of modern Sweden and one of the most consequential Scandinavian rulers in history. Gustav Vasa had essentially liberated Sweden from Danish control, established a new dynasty, and turned a fractured medieval kingdom into something resembling a real nation-state. And Erik was his golden boy, his heir, the future. And on paper, Erik had everything. He was extraordinarily well-educated, fluent in multiple languages, trained in mathematics, astrology, music, and military strategy. Contemporary accounts describe him as charismatic, handsome, and intensely intelligent. He was the kind of prince that other European courts looked at with genuine respect. He even pursued Elizabeth I of England as a potential bride, sending ambassadors and love letters across the North Sea. Elizabeth, ever the diplomatic genius, strung him along for years without ever saying yes or no, which honestly might have been one of the early cracks in Erik's mental state. When Gustav Vasa died in 1560, Erik ascended to the Swedish throne at 27 years old. He was ambitious. He wanted Sweden to be a major European power. He launched military campaigns, expanded trade, and tried to centralize royal authority in ways that made the old noble families extremely nervous. And that nervousness, that tension between a powerful king and a powerful aristocracy, is where this story starts to get dark. Almost from the beginning of his reign, Erik showed signs of deep, consuming paranoia. And here's where it gets complicated, because some of that paranoia was actually justified. His half-brothers, Johann and Karl, were powerful dukes with their own territories, their own armies, and their own ambitions. The Swedish nobility had a long tradition of limiting royal power, and many of them resented Erik's attempts to rule with a strong, centralized hand. There were real plots. There were real whispers. People genuinely were scheming against him. But Erik took that kernel of real danger and fed it with obsession until it consumed him. He became convinced that the powerful Sture family, one of Sweden's most prestigious noble houses, was conspiring to overthrow him. He saw enemies in every shadow. He began relying heavily on a man named Göran Persson, a low-born advisor who became something like Erik's personal Rasputin. Persson encouraged the king's suspicions, fed his fears, and helped him build cases against nobles who may or may not have actually done anything wrong. Erik started holding treason trials. He imprisoned his own brother Johann for secretly negotiating with Poland. He had members of the nobility arrested on increasingly thin evidence. The court became a place of terror where saying the wrong thing at dinner could land you in a dungeon. And through it all, Erik's behavior became more erratic. He would swing between periods of sharp, lucid brilliance and episodes of confusion, rage, and what contemporaries could only describe as madness. He reportedly talked to people who weren't there. He would issue orders and then forget he had given them. The people closest to him started exchanging nervous glances. And then came the event that changed everything. In May of 1567, Erik XIV committed an act so shocking that it essentially defined the rest of his reign and his entire legacy. He had several members of the Sture family and other nobles imprisoned in Uppsala Castle on charges of treason. What happened next is one of the most disturbing episodes in Scandinavian royal history. Erik went to the cell of Nils Sture, the young head of the family, reportedly to speak with him. Accounts vary on exactly what was said, but what is not in dispute is the outcome. Erik personally stabbed Niels Sture. Some sources say he did it in a sudden fit of rage. Others suggest it was more calculated, but he didn't stop there. He then ordered his guards to kill the other imprisoned nobles as well. When it was over, multiple members of Sweden's high aristocracy lay dead, murdered on the direct orders and by the direct hand of their king. What followed was perhaps even more disturbing than the murders themselves. Erik reportedly fled into the forests around Uppsala. He wandered for days, barefoot, incoherent, seemingly unaware of who or where he was. When he was finally found and brought back, he appeared to have no clear memory of what he had done. He swung between weeping remorse and cold denial. He tried to make amends with the surviving Sture family by offering them money and land, which, as you might imagine, did not exactly smooth things over when you've personally murdered their relatives. This is also the period when some of the most outlandish stories emerge. The claim that Erik ennobled a goat comes from accounts of his erratic behavior during these episodes of madness. Whether he literally granted a goat a noble title or whether this was exaggeration by his enemies to make him look unfit to rule, we honestly don't know for certain. And that uncertainty is part of what makes Erik's story so fascinating. The line between documented fact and political propaganda is blurry, in a way that historians are still trying to untangle 5 centuries later. After the Sture murders, Erik's grip on reality and on power deteriorated rapidly. He did manage one thing during this period that actually showed a different side of his character. He married Karin Månsdotter, a woman of peasant origin who had been his mistress. In an era when kings married for political alliances and noble bloodlines, Erik crowned a commoner as his queen. It was either a beautiful act of genuine love or another sign of his detachment from political reality. Probably both, but the nobles had seen enough. Erik's half-brothers Johan and Karl, who had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity, began openly rallying support against him. The Sture murders had given them all the justification they needed. The Swedish aristocracy, already resentful of Erik's centralizing ambitions, was now genuinely afraid of him. A king who could personally butcher noblemen in their cells was a king who posed an existential threat to every powerful family in the realm. Göran Persson, Erik's most loyal and most hated advisor, became a lightning rod for noble fury. Everything wrong with the kingdom was laid at his feet, and by extension at Erik's. The narrative that the king was not merely cruel but genuinely insane gained unstoppable momentum. And in 1568, Johan and Karl led a rebellion. Erik was deposed and imprisoned. His brother took the throne as Johan III. And the Swedish nobility made a declaration that was extraordinary, even by the dramatic standards of medieval European politics. They essentially declared Erik a non-person. Not just deposed, not just imprisoned, legally reduced to something less than a full human being with rights and standing. It was a political and philosophical statement as much as a legal one. This man is not fit to be called a king, a noble, or even a person. Erik spent the last 9 years of his life as a prisoner, moved between various castles, kept in increasingly harsh conditions. Karin Månsdotter, his peasant queen, was eventually separated from him. He lived in isolation, reportedly still experiencing episodes of madness, still brilliant in his lucid moments, still tortured by whatever demons haunted his mind. In 1577, Erik died, and the cause of death has been a source of dark fascination ever since. The long-standing tradition holds that he was poisoned with arsenic mixed into a bowl of pea soup, a dish that remains iconic in Swedish culture to this day. In 1958, his remains were actually exhumed and tested. The results showed elevated levels of arsenic, lending scientific support to the poisoning theory. Most historians believe the order came from Johan III, who had lived for nearly a decade with the uncomfortable reality that his deposed brother could become a rallying point for rebellion. So Erik XIV died as he had lived in his final years, a prisoner of forces he could not control, both political and psychological. Modern scholars have speculated about what might have actually been wrong with him. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe paranoid personality disorder, even the effects of mercury poisoning from the medicines of the era have all been suggested. We will probably never know for certain. What makes Erik XIV's story so compelling is not just the madness itself, It's the impossible tangle of real conspiracy and imagined conspiracy, of genuine brilliance and genuine breakdown, of a man who was simultaneously a victim and a perpetrator. His nobles really were plotting against him, and he really did lose his mind. Both things are true at the same time, and trying to figure out where one ends and the other begins is a puzzle that history may never fully solve. Erik reminds us that power doesn't protect you from your own mind, that a crown can be the heaviest thing a person ever wears, and that sometimes the most terrifying person in the kingdom is the one sitting on the throne. If this story captivated you the way it captivated me, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love the weird, dark, forgotten corners of history. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And drop a comment below telling me what you think actually drove Erik mad. Was it the pressure of the crown? Was it something biological he never had a chance of escaping? Or was it all just politics twisted into legend by the people who overthrew him? I want to hear your take. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.